Hello everyone and welcome to today's session on our LPC, or otherwise known as the Legal Practice course. My name's Rachel, I'm going to be your host for today, and we are joined by Anne Ferguson, who is the current acting programme leader, and Lindsay Bengtson, who is returning programme leader for the programme. So if you have any questions for Anne or Lindsay at all during the session, please do let us know. I'm going to hand over to Anne in just a moment, who's going to take us through a short presentation to give us a little bit more information about the programme, and that'll be followed by a question and answer session with herself and Lindsay. So as I say, any questions at all, please let us know. Just a couple of things before we get the session fully started. We do recommend that you use Chrome to view this today, and we recommend that you use a computer or a laptop rather than a mobile phone, and that'll just make sure that you can get the best out of the session. We also recommend that for best viewing experience, in the top corner of the screen, you'll see a small box with 3 little boxes underneath. If you just choose current speaker mode from there, that'll help whoever is speaking will be seen on your screen at the time, so it'll help you follow along the session. Lastly, if you do have any questions or comments, please let us know via the chat function. So in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, there's a little purple button with an arrow. If you can click on that and then go to the speech bubble, that's where you'll find our chat box. We're joined as well by my colleague Erin today, who's going to be moderating the session. If you have any issues at all, any technical issues, or you need any help with anything, Erin can help you there. So any questions for Anne or for Lindsay after the presentation is finished, please let us know at any point during the session and we'll get those answered before the end of the day. I'm going to hand over to Anne now and we'll get the session started. Thank you.
Right, hello everybody. I hope people can hear me and see me. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And what I'm going to do now is give you a sample taster lecture really of what you might expect if you do join the LPC or the LLM LPC program. So probably, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, shall we say, on that to run through that. And then after that, the questions. So as Rachel was just saying, my name is Anne Ferguson. I was in the past the program leader on the LPC and the LLM LPC, have recently been the acting program leader. And Lindsay, who's also now on the session, is the current program leader. So any questions, we're very happy to answer them. As well as having done the program leadership, I'm also the module tutor for the intellectual property module on the LPC and the LLM LPC. And actually, I'll be taking over the civil litigation and the advocacy modules. So I'm quite heavily involved in next year's programs. I have background experience in practice. I trained locally and worked in practice for over 10 years at least in commercial litigation, commercial disputes. So I also have a practice background as well as the academic background. And actually you'll find if you join us, that's the case with I think the vast majority of our staff as well. So to give you this sample lecture, I said I'm involved in intellectual property. It's one of the electives that we do offer in semester 2 of the module. We can explain a little bit more about the course structure in the Q&A. So if you come to that module, this is the kind of thing that I would start you off talking about. So intellectual property, what is this idea of intellectual property? Well, it is law that regulates the creation, the use, the exploitation of mental and creative labour. So it's these certain rights, these certain property rights that there really are over what is said to be the products of the mind. And you do then get a property right, a property protection over something that is not necessarily tangible. And I'll talk about this in a minute, you may own a book, but you will not own the intellectual property in that book. So there is the tangible item, and then there is also this less tangible intellectual property right. So what I want to show you now is that maybe sounds quite abstract, this idea of intellectual property. I don't know if people know about it or not, but the reason we teach this course and the point about this course is that it is across all sorts of everyday items that you see, that you watch, that you read, that you experience, that you use. All of those items have got intellectual property. So it's to get you thinking about this and raise your awareness of this. So on this slide, what I'm saying, intellectual property, what is it? It's not just some abstract concept. It does relate to these concrete items. For example, I don't know, you can tell me in the chat if anybody's ever heard of Only Fools and Horses, but there was a case recently about whether you could have copyright in a character which was really interesting and which related to this Only Fools and Horses television program. There is also a recent dispute which is going to the Supreme Court. A lot of IP cases are very current, fast-moving, going to the Supreme Court, going to the European courts. The European case law is important to us as well. And there's one that's going recently to the Supreme Court, a trademark dispute with Sky. So there's a lot of big names that you'll know about as well that are involved in IP. The cake, people will hopefully know. I don't know whether people know Colin the Caterpillar or know some of the other versions in the different supermarkets, but there was a recent dispute between Marks and Spencer's and Aldi to do with the intellectual property rights in their cake. So, as I say, very wide-ranging. Opoly, it was to do with fashion, so IP comes into fashion quite a lot as well, and to do with design rights in items of clothing, dress designs. The picture here in the middle is to illustrate, I don't know again if people have heard about the metaverse, but there's a lot of discussion now going on about IP rights and the digital world and digital assets and what there is, what IP rights there are, what ownership there is in those. And then finally in these pictures, people will presumably watch YouTube, perhaps upload content, view content. There's a lot of IP rights in that content. And Ed Sheeran, somebody that people may recognize, copyright cases to do with the lyrics that he has written, the songs he has written, whether he has committed any copyright infringement of those lyrics. So just to show illustrative, the wide variety of contexts in which you may find these intellectual property rights. Now with my students, I like this, and I thought I'd try this here. You may not have an awareness of this, but I like to think about, how many things have you seen or used today that involve intellectual property? So I can see there are some questions coming up in the chat. Thank you for those. And as Erin says, we'll talk about those later. But does anyone want to suggest in the chat items that they use that involve IP, things they've seen that involve IP? I'll give you a minute to type. If not, I'll move on, but tell me what you think. Yes, yep, definitely. Actually, I had that as well from somebody else this year who was showing me his Mont Blanc pen. So yes, there could well be different rights that we can talk about in that. Anything else? Anything that anyone is looking at now? Anything anyone is drinking now, perhaps? Anything anyone was wearing now? Yes, good. Exactly. That's right. Thanks, Carolyn. So I will move on because I know this is just a taster session, but this is the idea that it's all around us, basically. So again, if you were to embark on the course and you were looking at this intellectual property elective, the kind of thing that we cover in the course is these different intellectual property rights that are listed there. So we look at copyright, trademarks and passing off, confidentiality, patents, design rights and confidential information. And in the next few minutes, I really just want to then explain to you briefly what those different rights are and where you may come across them. So the first one I'm talking about is copyright. This is when you're looking at original literary, dramatic, musical and artistic works, as it says there, films and broadcasts. So people will have an awareness of the existence of copyright. You may not have an awareness of the extent of what it covers. This is an automatic right that arises when somebody creates something, comes up with one of these items, and you can stop other people copying. It doesn't stop other people creating it independently. But the idea is, as I said, it rewards the product of your mind, your creation. And so for copyright, I mean, the pictures are quite illustrative of the position that there's the traditional forms of copyright that we had, for example, in a book, and there's a case on this book. I actually haven't read it, but there's quite a significant case on this, or on a painting, there's copyright. But actually, we look at and we think about copyright is ending now in our digital age. So the picture in the top right, the idea of that is it's a work created by artificial intelligence. That we can think about how technology and what happens to create those circumstances. Means is because of a recent EU item, a fashion brand, which again is pushing the boundaries of copyright, which again we would think about and explore. Next kind of type of right, this is again something you're going to be very familiar with. So when I was saying, is there anything that you're wearing that might have a connection with IP? Well, what you could be thinking about there is we are thinking about trademarks for a lot of branded goods. And so we learn about those, and we learn about the ones on the slide. We've got a lot of the names, which were the traditional forms of trademarks, logos. So Coca-Cola, then Nike, the Dell that was mentioned. It covers pharmaceutical products, it covers cars, it covers very much all goods you can think of. There will be trademarks in relation to those goods. So we think about the traditional marks, as I say, of names and logos, but we also think about where you have where you may have things like the development of trademarking shapes and colours and signs and patterns. So again, it's quite a broad and interesting, vibrant area. It's a registered mark, so we learn about the criteria for registration, and we look at it from an UK and an EU perspective. We also think about it, we do teach the UK law, but especially with IP law, the EU law is still very relevant. So we definitely still think about the EU, and we think about the international perspective as well. And then another kind of IP right that we deal with is passing off. So it's similar to trademark. It's almost like an unregistered protection, which can cover things that trademarks don't cover. But again, it's the idea that somebody has developed a business, a brand, a service. Somebody else is trying to pass themselves off as the established brand. And we look at when is that fair competition, when is that allowed, and when does that go too far, and when is that not permissible. Okay. Then another type of IP right that we think about are patents. And again, you may not know much about patents, but again, a lot of things that you use will involve patents. Massive amount in communications, telecommunications, massive amount in, for example, your phone, your laptop. There's a lot of activity in the patent world. There's also a lot in terms of pharmaceutical products, drug development, and again, people trying to push the boundary and see what they can get protection for, and also see then when there can be fair competition for others to innovate. So we look at, okay, what is a patent? What are the criteria for it? You need to have novelty and inventive step. It's a registered right. How long does it last for? And what does it give you protection against? Okay. Hopefully this is giving you an idea as well of the items that, as I say, the everyday items you think about, that there is more law in those, that there is more to them than you might otherwise realize. So we also look at this is design rights. And we look at, again, if you've created something, in this case, some sort of product, more likely, you can have design rights over that product, again, to stop other people infringing your rights and copying your product too closely. And then this, again, we would look at UK registered design rights, we'd look at unregistered design rights, and we look at the EU perspective, community registered and unregistered design protection. And finally, in terms of the rights that we talk about, you may have heard about this, about confidential information. You may have heard about trade secrets and what this is. And we look at these because these are very important to business protection as part of IP, but also actually as part of the general confidential information of a business that is valuable to a business. And it can sit with patents and maintain the confidentiality of patents before you apply for a patent. But also you can rely on secrecy. And there are famous examples. For example, I understand the Iron Brew recipe, the Coca-Cola recipe, I think the Kentucky Fried Chicken recipe are generally kept as secrets, and that can last longer than patent protection. And people can try and protect this valuable commercial information they have. So again, we look at what that right is, how people do that. So why do we do this? Why do we think about it? Why is it important? Well, it is commercially valuable. So I've said, these trade secrets can be very important to a business. The patent portfolio that a business has can be extremely important. All the brands that I've talked about. So, that brand, that image is very important to those businesses, is commercially valuable. It does encourage innovation, hopefully. So somebody creates something, they write something, they design something, they know that they will have some protection to stop other people copying them. So it encourages innovation. They can then license it, their right, potentially, assign it, mortgage it, treat it as a property right, make money out of it. So there is an innovative angle and a commercially valuable angle. And interestingly, there's an argument that it protects the consumer, that you or I buying something will have a knowledge of, what am I getting? What am I getting for that product that I'm buying? I trust X brand, it is reliable, and so I can choose that and feel comfortable in my choice. But there is a flip side to that, which is how much is competition restricted? How much can the brand monopolize or dominate when it shouldn't? So we do touch on that. The key, as I'll talk about in a minute for the LPC, is we look at a lot of the commercial, the practical angle, because is a practical course. But we do think a little bit about, where's the balance? Is the consumer being protected? Where's the balance between the protection of the right and the fair competition? Okay. So just another minute, really, I'll wrap this up, because I do know there's quite a few questions have come through, and I want to make sure that I leave time for these questions. But this is to give a flavour as well of what we're thinking about for the LPC course. We do cover IP because it has got this significant commercial value as this business asset that I've mentioned. So you can exploit it. You can license it, you can sign it, you can exploit it yourself. So it's significant, and it's useful in terms of commercial law and actually commercial disputes, which is what I was involved in as well. And most companies, as I say, will have some IP rights, some sort of IP portfolio, as well as individuals having their own IP rights. We look at the creation of these rights, who owns them, how are they infringed, how do you enforce those rights, and then how do you deal with them commercially, including, to a certain extent, issues, for example, on a business sale and how IP rights are dealt with. Okay. I'll not deal with this in too much detail because I've touched on this already, but if you're thinking about this, if you're so inclined after this little taster lecture, you can go off and look at these different items that I'm talking about that have IP rights and think about, why do we have them? Do we think the balance is right? Do we think there's too much domination? Do we think it helps us as a consumer with consumer choice? Or do we want there to be, do we think there should be more freedom? But this is just, I think, as I say, get you thinking, open your mind to a little bit more of these rights being out there. And then the final thing I really wanted to finish with in terms of this lecture is, one of the reasons I've told you this is because it gives a flavour of the kind of things that we cover in our modules and in our electives. We'll talk a bit more about the detail of the course in a minute, but it's to give you an idea of how these kind of modules are structured. So we do structure it, and there are, I think, there are in the core modules, you have the core modules in semester 1. And I think you have more lectures, but in the electives, it's still 1 a week, but it's I think for 12 weeks rather than 10 weeks. But in the electives, the way we structure it is we have 10 lectures, you have 1 lecture a week, which gives you the sort of the core content that you need. But then you have 3-hour workshops, again, 3 hours every week, where we deal with different topics, and in those we expand the content of the lectures, we do practical exercise, we do worked examples, we do discussion, and so that's really what brings the modules to life, and that really fleshes out the content. So you have got 10 lectures, and I think there was a question about, how are these carried out. Lectures is all in person, we're all in person, but lectures are recorded, so you can catch up on those. Workshops, though, it is 3 hours a week for each module that you are doing, again in person, and we think attendance is really important because we are expanding on the topic. In IP, and I think in other modules there's different things, but again, to try and give it a sort of bring it to life flavour, and one of my ex-colleagues who's still a practitioner in IP comes in and gives a guest lecture to you. We do sessions with the design school where a design lecturer tells you about his experience in design, and then you work at advising him on his IP rights. I do a current issues lecture on some things that are currently going on. We can have discussion boards. I'm always open to if people find new cases and stories talking to me about it. There is a revision week and a revision drop-in, and then you are set every week as well. Some self-study prep for workshops and things like that as well. The assessment, and again, we can talk about this in more detail, but the assessment is 100% exam. It's a written paper, in person, open book. Okay. So that's to give you a flavour of the kind of thing that we cover and how we approach it and how we cover it. I'll also say, and as I put in the slide, you know, when your module tutor is saying, I'm teaching this module, there's my details are on the ELP, we're all very happy to be approachable, answer questions, hear from you if there are issues, meet with you if there's something that's interesting to discuss as well. Okay, so that was really what I wanted to cover, to give you this taster if we want to move into some more substantive questions.
Thank you so much, Anne. That was really interesting, and hopefully that's given everyone a little bit of a flavour of the course and of Northumbria and of the teaching staff as well. So we'll move on to the question and answer session now. If anyone does have any questions, just a reminder that you can ask us at any time just during via the chat function in the bottom corner of the screen. We have had a few coming in already, so I'm going to ask you a couple, and then I've got a few that we've received prior to the event as well. So just to start off with, one of the questions was about the clinic. They were asking, is law clinic experience guaranteed on this course, and if so, how many hours a week? And that was from Carolyn.
So I'll start to answer this. Lindsay, you might step in, because this is my understanding of it, that there is a student law office elective module, and so that is one of the module choices in semester 2. Now, there is a limit to the number of places on that module, but at least recently, everybody who's applied for it has got a place. So it is just one of the electives. So it doesn't mean everybody wants it, everybody chooses it. So there is a limit to the places, but most recently, as far as I know, people that have applied have got a place, although that cannot be completely guaranteed. It's treated, and there's a question about how many hours a week. I mean, it is another elective module. I think in it there needs to be more flexibility, because it's not quite the same as I said. Ours is the strict elective is very structured with 1 lecture or 3 hours workshops. With the law clinic, because it's more active, there is a bit more flexibility, but we're thinking about a similar amount of time spent, but just not necessarily in as fixed a period. But Lindsay, you might want to say, is that right? Am I correct on that?
Yes, it is, Anne. Hello, everybody. So yeah, the student law office elective is available in the 2nd semester. My experience is that it is rare, if you've indicated a preference to do that module, for you not to end up doing it. The way that module works, just very briefly, is that the law school works in collaboration with a local law firm, and you are supervised on a couple of cases under the supervision of a qualified solicitor, and that qualified solicitor is both a solicitor from that local law firm and a solicitor within the law school. And as Anne said, although you'll find in the 1st semester all your timetable is your timetable solely for Tuesdays and Wednesdays, when you come to do the student law office module, a bit more flexibility is requested, because obviously you've got a live client, and we need to be a little bit more flexible to accommodate their needs. But I can certainly speak to anybody who's interested in that module to give you a bit more information on that.
That's lovely, thank you. Carolyn's also asked if there's any additional scope for law clinic hours, sorry, that was scope for additional law clinic hours. So if you were successful in gaining a place, is there sort of set hours there, or is there a possibility to gain more? Not sure if that's something you can answer now, or we can get back to it after the session.
I don't quite know what are you thinking about, Carolyn? I mean, there is, as Lindsay said, the sort of flexibility. So it's not exactly a set number of hours. It's the hours that are needed really in the circumstances of the client at the time. So we don't say there's a particular number of hours as such. So I'm not sure what you're thinking about for additional law hours. Perhaps if you want more information, put it in the chat, or we can have a separate discussion with you if that might be easier.
So we'll move on to another question while we wait for Carolyn to get back to us, but we can get back to her with anything that we can't confirm today. So I know Erin has given Carolyn the email address for the events team, so she can contact us there with those. So the next question we have, Louise has asked that she has enrolled already on the LPC, but it's the diploma, and she just wants to double check she's not needing to do a dissertation at any point during this course. Can you confirm that's correct?
Yeah, that's right. Louisa, if you're just on the LPC and not the LLM LPC, then there is no dissertation, there's no project. That's correct.
Brilliant. And Carolyn has confirmed, she said some universities offer law clinic on a voluntary basis alongside the course to increase the QWE hours. Is that making sense?
Yeah, Lindsay, actually, I'm not sure about them. I know that there are some partnerships that that we have within the law school with certain organisations. And I know citizens advice as well and things like that. So there might be scope for increasing the voluntary hours, but not necessarily within the SLO elective. Might that be right?
Yeah, absolutely, Anne. So the student law office elective, that you're obviously assessed on that, and it forms part of your ultimate mark that you'll gain in your LPC. So within that module, you will get your allocated cases, but you will be told by your supervisor you can go above and beyond with those cases if you wish to further develop your own skills and attributes. But I think what you're talking about specifically in relation to qualifying work experience, which is different here. We do have links with our local citizens advice, which Anne says, and I can certainly make some inquiries with citizens advice to see if they would like additional volunteers throughout the year. So that's definitely a possibility, yeah.
Thank you both for confirming that. That's great. The last question I can see of Carolyn is she's asking if the 7 years since degree mandatory, or is there some flexibility? So is there any way, for example, someone could come after studying the LLB at the 8 years, or is it very much that you have to do within those 7?
There's flexibility. There is flexibility. But we would need to look at that application in detail if it's beyond that time. And the reason we do that is because obviously there's the 7 years, that's really thinking, have you got current legal knowledge? So where we have been flexible in that is when it's been over that time period, but somebody has had continuing legal experience, worked in a legal field, you know, we can say, no, they are still going to be reasonably up to date. They're not going to have forgotten everything and find the course really difficult or, you know, really nearly impossible to do. So we need to look at your CV, you need to look at the application and think about what continuing experience you have to let us use that discretion and that flexibility.
Lovely, that all makes sense. So probably best for Carolyn to go through our applicant services, our admissions team, and then just make a note of the degree when she passed that, and any additional information. I think you've got an area where you can add some additional info, and there's employment information as well that we ask for as well. So they should be able to look at that and then make a decision on an individual basis. Brilliant. So I'm just going to move on to a question that we've had before the session started. So can I just check, is there much one-to-one support or help available on the course if that is needed?
Yes, there is. There's quite a lot. I have to say, and Lindsay will agree, we're quite a long-standing team of ex-practitioners on the LPC, and very experienced, very approachable. So we are always happy to have people, you know, meet with us, talk to us. So if you're not understanding something, we always say, please get in touch. And as I say, everybody is extremely, I say this, but everybody's very nice. You also do get the personal tutor. So you can go to speak to your personal tutor. So you have got that one-to-one support as well. And then because we all have got different kinds of different practice experience, you know, sometimes people come along to us and want to talk about, you know, our experience and when you're starting to think about careers and things like that. So there's that support as well. And then we have also got a really good graduate futures team, which will do one-to-one support as well, one-to-one interviews, one-to-one meetings where they will look at your CV, look at applications, talk to you about options, do practice interviews with you, as well as them doing quite a few events throughout the year with different employers or prospective employers. So I would say yes, there is. And then outside that, depending on, you know, if people have got we call them SAPs now, but you know, any potential disabilities, there's a process you can go through there to get that set up. So there's one-to-one support in that as well. So I think that there's quite a lot of there's university support, there's the graduate future support, and then there is a particular support that we offer as the staff on the LPC programme as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It was a great answer, Anne. I've got another question which was sent in prior to the event, and that is, can you tell us how the course is assessed? Oh, you're just on mute there, Anne. Sorry, I think you might have...
I've muted myself. That's brilliant. No, I was just having a quick look at the questions as well, and I think Carolyn was asking a question about the timetable as well. So maybe to answer that question, the way we do that with the timetable is an induction week. You're pretty much in the whole week, which is, I think, is it the week of the 25th of September, something like that it starts. And then after that, you're in 2 days a week. So you're in on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. So that is how the timetable is structured throughout semester 1 and semester 2. The idea is it gives you balance. If you do need to work or work part-time, you've got scope for that, as well as attending the university. And you've also then got, you know, there is preparation time as well, outside obviously attendance, but you're in 2 days pretty much. And then moving on to the assessment, there's a variety of types of assessments. So some are skills assessments that you do, and they will be in-course assessments. For example, there's a drafting or a legal writing, actually solicitors' accounts. Those are all assessed in semester 1, and the drafting, practical legal research, things like that. They are coursework in course with handout and hand-in dates in semester 1. So there's a variety of methods of assessment, because then at the end of semester 1 and in January, you have got the core assessments, and they are in-person exams. The good thing about them is they're open book assessments. So it doesn't mean obviously you don't revise, but you have got the information there. And because of that, we really treat it as we want to know, yes, okay, you know the law, but we want to know the practical application, which is what we focus on throughout this course. You know, client scenarios, work scenarios, and what is the practical application? What do those facts mean then to the client? How would you advise the client? So we're constantly thinking about that. That's the core assessments. The electives are all assessed on that basis. And then you also do have the skills of advocacy and interviewing, and they are assessed again in person. You do a short interview, a short advocacy assessment. You are prepared for those, you're given information on those, you're given information on advocacy. It's taught with civil litigation. You do some advocacy in the civil litigation sessions, and you also do an advocacy mock, and you're given feedback on that as well. So there's a variety of assessments. So the course is extremely structured, extremely well structured, to take into account all those different assessments throughout the year.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Anne. So I've seen Carolyn's responded just with regards to her question about the 7-year limit. She said that she's been told to apply via law cabs. What I would recommend you do, Carolyn, is just email the applicant services team on the email address that Erin has sent to you in the search, in the chat box there. If you just message them and double check that it's okay for you to apply, I'm sure they would have looked at your application and they wouldn't recommend that you do without having you know, assessed whether it's something that you would be accepted onto already, but it is worth an email just to double check before you submit the application through law cabs. So just to move
Yeah,
on.
I mean, I was going to say, Rachel, I think the way it happens as well is that now the applications are made centrally through law cabs, but then they do come to us. They're then released to us.
Yes.
And then where there's a question where there is like a criteria aren't completely met, they get referred to me or to Lindsay, and we look at them, and then we make a decision to say, actually, yes, in the circumstances, yes, no. We've had people in or interviewed them, chatted it through with them, to talk about, the situation. We don't want to stop people becoming solicitors. We've had people actually who are older as well in years, and they've said it's always been my lifetime's ambition. And it's like, well, that's great. If it is, then yes, we will help you, to do the course. So we don't want to turn people away, but for that kind of situation, we need to look at it more carefully.
That's absolutely great. Thank you so much. So I just want to remind anyone, if you do have any questions for either of the panelists, please let us know as soon as you can. We will be wrapping up the session shortly if we don't have any further questions. But I do have one last one which came in prior to the event. And I was just wondering if you could both tell us a little bit about a day in the life of an LPC student. What would that entail? What sort of facilities do we have on campus as well? Thank you.
Well, I'll start, and then Lindsay, you can always tell me if there's anything else to add. But as I say, in terms of the LPC, it is timetabled on the Tuesday and the Wednesday to give you the flexibility in your work-life balance. Those days that you're on campus are reasonably full in terms of the timetable, but there is a lunch break. There's a Starbucks in the law building. I don't know whether anybody's actually been to the law building and seen it. You perhaps haven't, so we've got quite a nice new-ish, well, it's quite new, business and law building with a nice cafe area downstairs, Starbucks. Then we have got quite a lot of study areas in the centre of each floor, as well as then the classrooms. There's the big lecture theatres, and there's also smaller sort of Harvard style in the round lecture theatres for smaller lectures. So there's a nice environment. There's a specific law library as well that you can go to if you've got a break, as well as the main central library with Northumbria. And then we're not far from the centre of Newcastle. I understand there's a really good sports central. There's a really good gym. I haven't been to it. And so there is a lot of, there's in the library itself, massive main library with, again, a lot of study areas, breakout areas, and different spaces for you to learn when you're on campus. So I think that there's really good facilities. And as I say, for the mix of, if you are wanting to work from home, obviously you can do that on days when you're not on campus. Of course, if you want to come in, you can make use of those facilities as well. I know some people like doing a variety of those things. Lindsay, do you think there's anything else to add?
No, I think that was really comprehensive, Anne. Just to add really that everything is within walking distance, your library, the various cafes, coffee shops. There's nothing too far for people.
Fab. And we've got loads of facilities on campus. It is quite a small, compact, but we've got a lot of buildings. And as Anne said, it's so convenient as well to get to the shopping centre, and loads of modes of transport as well. We've just popped a link in for parking, as I know Carolyn was asking whether that was guaranteed for students. So we do try when we can, if any students live outside a specific distance, we do try and provide that. So I've just popped the link in there, and I know Erin's popped it in as well. If there is any further questions that come to mind after the session has finished, because we will be wrapping up in just a moment, please take a moment to just go back through that chat, the sort of what we've discussed today. There's a lot of links in there, and I know Erin's put the email address in for the events team. So if you have any questions, make sure you send them to that email address, and we'll pass them on to the relevant people, and then they'll get back to you after the session. So without any last questions there, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to Anne and also to Lindsay for being part of this today. There's been so much information, so I really hope that everyone's learned something today and they've figured out whether the course is right for them or Northumbria is right for them. And hopefully we'll be seeing a lot of people in September. Again, any further questions, please do let us know. We're always here, and we have lots of information on our website as well. And we look forward to seeing everyone soon. Thanks to everyone for coming today, and hopefully enjoy your evening. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say thank you very much as well for people taking the time to join. And Lindsay and I are happy to receive emails as well if there are queries that do come out of anything further coming from this event. Okay.